Good afternoon from the KUOW newsroom. This is Seattle Now. I'm Paige Browning. Washington State is getting closer and closer to passing, for the first time, an income tax. It would only hit high earners. More in a few minutes. First, a roundup of today's top stories. It's Tuesday, February 24th. In immigration news, the Tukwila City Council has temporarily banned construction of any new detention centers. This comes after word got out that ICE was potentially looking to lease space at the Riverfront Technical Park in Tukwila. The city of Tukwila cannot regulate lease agreements on private property, but the City Council found a way to work around that issue by passing a 6-month emergency moratorium. Here's City Council member Verna Seal speaking during last night's vote.
I am more than in favor of us passing this tonight and figuring out what else we can do, because it's not going to stop here. It's not going to stop here.
The city of SeaTac passed a similar moratorium earlier this month, and the Seattle City Council is considering a proposal as well. A grim report from Pierce County today. Law enforcement say 4 people were stabbed to death, and the suspect was killed by police this morning near Gig Harbor on the Key Peninsula. The Pierce County Sheriff's Office says deputies initially responded to reports of a 32-year-old man violating a no-contact order. Then found that the suspect had stabbed people outside a home. Officers fired, and the suspect died at the scene. An independent investigation is underway. We hit the upgrade button on transit this week. Tap to Pay is now live on public transit in King County, allowing riders to use debit cards or a digital wallet as an alternative to the Orca card. Ruby DeLuna has the latest.
It took time to coordinate with different agencies and technology platforms, so riders can now use credit or debit cards to pay for transit across the Puget Sound region.
It just takes time to integrate something new into the system, but we're really pleased to be introducing this.
David Jackson is spokesperson for Sound Transit.
It makes riding easier, especially if you forgot your Orca card or your family's visiting from out of town.
Tap to Pay is launched as Seattle prepares to welcome visitors this summer for FIFA World Cup matches. Ruby DeLuna, KUOW News.
In other local news, a police hiring bonus seems to not be working. Nearly a year after $100 million were earmarked by state lawmakers to help cities and counties hire more police officers, just 6 police departments have applied for the grants, and none have been approved. Police and county government organizations told the Washington State Standard that bureaucracy and technical issues are slowing applications down. A new online portal from Washington's Criminal Justice Training Commission is getting better reviews. The historic Hiawatha Community Center in West Seattle is now open after 6 years of renovations. Neighbor Diane Walsh was at a recent ribbon-cutting ceremony.
We're just psyched to see this community center finally open. Our kids are 9 and 11, and we've been waiting for this to open. We have great memories when they were little of using the center and are excited that the day is finally here.
Finally here, Seattle Parks and Rec Interim Superintendent Michelle Finnegan acknowledged the many delays in opening.
What began as a stabilization project turned into a full-scale renewal as we came across multiple issues along the way. We sincerely apologize for the long closure, and we are incredibly grateful for the extraordinary patience this community has shown throughout the process.
The 115-year-old brick building has been seismically retrofitted in a project costing $7 million. Members of the jazz community and local radio scene are mourning the death of Ken Wiley. The longtime host of KNKX's Art of Jazz program died earlier this month after suffering from a long illness. He was 87 years old. Wiley was a trombonist and a public school teacher in Tacoma before he got into radio and first started at KPLU, now KNKX, in the early 1980s. He retired in 2023. A couple short notes tonight. The Cascade Mountains received some much-needed snow this week. 7 new inches have fallen on Snoqualmie Pass since Sunday morning, and 10 inches have fallen on Stevens Pass. Snowpack is still much lower than average for this time of year in most of the Cascades and across Washington state, but there could be more coming. Snow is predicted for the next 4 days. And Capitol Hill Block Party dropped its schedule today with an indie pop lineup peppered with stars. Muna will headline alongside Wet Leg, Disco Lines, and DJ sets by Tinashe and drag queen Trixie Mattel. For a second year, the Block Party will be ages 21 and older, which the organizers say is an attempt to optimize the footprint across the Pike Pine corridor, coming after years of crowds that packed the streets like sardines. They've also expanded to 3 days this year, August 7th to 9th. Now, our feature story for the day. A proposed income tax on high earners continues to work its way through the Washington legislature. Majority Democrats are so intent on it passing, it's part of their budget proposals. So there's a lot riding on making it to the governor's desk. KUOW's state government reporter, Sarah Mises-Tan, is here with the latest. She spoke with Kim Malcolm.
This proposed income tax would be a historic shift in our state's tax structure. This would be the first time an income tax has been instituted in 90 years here in Washington. And the authors of the bill say a big sea change is needed. The rich need to start paying their fair share. So can you explain this a little bit more for us?
Absolutely. So for those who are not up to speed, this tax, more casually referred to as the millionaire's tax, would levy about a 10% tax on all incomes over $1 million. So to be clear, that's not a tax on that first $1 million that you make. It's a tax on any amount of money above $1 million.
Okay.
Proponents say Washington's current tax system is regressive, which means it puts the biggest tax burden on the poorest people, mostly through sales tax. They say this tax could bring in about $3.7 billion in revenue, and most of this money would go to the state's general fund to fill budget holes, covering things like public education and healthcare. Another portion would go towards sales tax breaks and funding the state's public defense system. And based off the most recently presented state budget, Senate Majority Leader and author of the bill, Jamie Peterson, says a tax that would bring in this amount of revenue is absolutely needed for the state to upkeep its services that are otherwise getting cut as the state faces a budget deficit. He mentioned his own kids in today's hearing and said he wants them to be able to live in a place with well-funded public education and higher education systems.
And that world is pretty hard to imagine with the tax structure that we have right now. Last year, I think we ran squarely into the fact that we have a broken, upside-down, 100-year-old tax system that is just not adequate to meet the needs of our state in the 21st century.
Right. So that's the stance from Democratic leadership. We've heard that Republican leaders, though, are opposed. They say it'll cause wealthier residents to leave Washington, which would in turn negate the revenue gains of this tax. And they say a tax like this would be devastating for Washington's economy as businesses leave. What did you hear from people concerned about the tax today?
Yeah, so we heard a lot from small business owners who say this is a tax on cash flow that they need to keep growing. And some have quoted that this could hurt about 20% of small businesses if passed. A small business owner actually testified today saying this would absolutely harm minority-owned businesses who often work with smaller margins. I also talked with Jared Walczak. He's a senior fellow at the Tax Foundation, and he noted that overall, a revenue source like this income tax on a relatively small portion of the population, about 30,000 people, could be subject to fluctuating.
And the risk when you have a tax that is this high rate on a concentrated number of people is one, extreme volatility. If you're counting on this revenue to provide assistance to others year over year, this is a really bad source of revenue for that, because when you're taxing just the high income of high earners, much of this is capital gains income. That fluctuates dramatically from year to year.
Sarah, can you put this tax into context for us? Because Washington isn't the only state that's hopping on this tax the rich trend right now.
No, definitely not. So California is also considering a one-time 5% tax on residents worth more than $1 billion. It's actually arguably much more of a dramatic move, which would include assets, so things like taxing the value of people's houses and boats. And that is something that Washington's tax would not do. Massachusetts implemented a very similar tax in 2022 that taxed 4% on households making over $1 million. It brought in $3 billion more than it was actually initially expected to bring in. And with that extra revenue, the state has been able to use that money to provide things like free public transit and universal school meals. Minnesota has implemented a 1% tax on incomes above $1 million, and Virginia is considering a 10% tax on incomes above $1 million as well. Wesley Tharp is a tax policy advisor at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, and he says simply,
no state has ever enacted a personal income tax increase on high-income people that did not raise significant amounts of revenue, even accounting for the fact that there might be a sort of small group of people around the margins who choose to change their location.
But of course, Washington is unique in that historically it has not had an income tax, and voters have rejected an income tax 10 times before in the past nearly 100 years. So that's worth noting.
Yes, indeed. So what is the time pressure like here for state lawmakers to get something done on this proposed millionaire's tax?
Yeah, so right now the bill is being considered in the House, and the hope is that if passed out of the House, it'll head to the governor's desk to sign by March 13th. But the bill itself is not going to take effect and begin to bring in revenue until 2029. In the meantime, opponents say there will be legal challenges if the governor passes this bill, and they'll most likely be looking to put it to Washington residents as a ballot initiative this November. Though first, they're going to need to get those signatures.
State government reporter Sarah Mises-Tan speaking with KUOW's Kim Malcolm. Next time on Seattle Now, a new play outlines Bruce Lee's time in Seattle before he became the icon we know today.
He has these big dreams, and they seem impossible to achieve. And I think what's so great about his time in Seattle, especially, is really figuring out what it was about Seattle that was able to help him figure out that new path.
Hear more about Young Dragon, a Bruce Lee story, Wednesday morning. That's all for today from the KUOW newsroom in Seattle. Our producer is Andy Hurst. The interview in today's episode was produced by John O'Brien. And I'm Paige Browning. Seattle Now and KUOW are members of the NPR network. See ya.